Mark never expected his entire life to collapse in a single sentence. His wife, Melissa, stood in front of him with a strangely calm expression and said she was pregnant with his younger brother Ethan's child. For a moment, everything inside him went silent, like his brain refused to process the words. But then he saw the way her eyes shifted, the way her hands trembled just slightly, and something inside him snapped back into focus. He told her the truth she clearly didn't expect. Ethan had gotten a vasectomy 5 years ago. Melissa froze, her smile cracking instantly as if someone had ripped the mask off her face. The air in the room thickened, every second turning heavier than the last. Mark realized that whatever this was, whatever she was hiding, it ran much deeper than a simple lie. And this was only the beginning of a nightmare he never saw coming. Melissa's face drained of color the moment Mark mentioned Ethan's vasectomy. For a few seconds, she didn't even blink. Then, almost on cue, she forced out a shaky laugh and claimed Mark must be confused, that Ethan probably lied to him, that men do weird things and keep secrets from each other. But Mark had seen Ethan's medical papers with his own eyes. He knew exactly what the truth was. When Ethan arrived at the house, he walked in with a confused expression, unaware of the storm waiting for him. Melissa immediately pointed at him, shouting that he needed to step up and be honest about their supposed affair. Ethan stared at her, as if she had just spoken another language. Then he looked at Mark and shook his head slowly. He said he never slept with Melissa. In fact, he explained he had blocked her months ago because she kept sending him suggestive photos and messages that made him deeply uncomfortable. Melissa's mouth fell open, and she instantly denied everything, claiming Ethan was trying to shame her and hide the truth. But her voice cracked, and Mark noticed it. The more she talked, the more inconsistencies spilled out. Dates didn't line up. Her excuses contradicted her earlier stories. And every attempt she made to defend herself backfired. Mark knew her pregnancy timeline didn't match what she was claiming. Something was wrong, horribly wrong, and the truth was hiding behind the cracks in her words. Mark sat down and laid out the timeline carefully, step by step. He reminded Melissa that she had spent 3 full weeks at his sister Amber's house, during the exact window when the baby would have been conceived. He remembered she had argued with him before leaving, saying she needed space and quiet, but now the reason for that trip looked very different. Melissa shook her head violently, insisting she barely interacted with Amber's husband, Chris, and that she was exhausted the whole time. But Mark had visited once during those weeks. He remembered seeing Chris acting strangely distant. He remembered Melissa avoiding eye contact the entire evening. And now all those small moments were clicking together in a way that made his stomach twist. Ethan finally spoke again, his tone calm but firm. He told Melissa to stop dragging everyone into her lies, that getting pregnant and blaming him was not only impossible but disgusting. Melissa snapped back, calling him a coward and accusing him of trying to destroy her marriage. Mark simply watched, realizing he was witnessing the unraveling of a story she had tried desperately to control. Every lie she told opened another door. Every denial exposed another flaw. And as Mark pieced everything together, he felt the truth rising like a shadow behind her. The father of the baby was Ethan. It wasn't even someone Melissa could safely name. The real answer was buried in that 3-week stay at Amber's house. And Mark knew he was getting closer to uncovering it. Melissa didn't let the silence sit for long. The moment she felt the pressure closing in, she shifted instantly into victim mode. Her voice broke, tears welled up, and she clutched her stomach as if Mark's questions were somehow physically hurting her. She accused him of being cold, paranoid, and cruel for doubting her at a time when she was emotionally vulnerable. But her performance didn't land the way she hoped. Not this time. When the group chat with both families opened, the situation exploded instantly. Melissa was typing paragraphs at lightning speed, painting herself as a misunderstood wife trapped between two brothers. She insisted she had only gone to Amber's house because Mark had been distant. She said Ethan had manipulated her emotionally. She even claimed the vasectomy story was fake and that Mark had fallen for some online rumor. But Ethan, tired of hearing his name dragged around, dropped the bomb. He uploaded a photo of his official vasectomy records directly into the chat. The room went silent. Chat bubbles stopped. Even Melissa didn't type for 30 long seconds. Then she finally responded with a single line. That doesn't mean anything. Everyone could feel her panic through the screen. And that was when Olivia joined in. She didn't mean to stir the pot. In her mind, she was helping. She casually mentioned that Melissa had stayed at Amber's house for 3 weeks, and that Amber had told her Melissa barely left the guest room except for late-night talks with Chris. Olivia said it innocently, but the effect was immediate. Mark felt his stomach twist as the words sank in. Melissa, on the other hand, unleashed a furious rant, accusing Olivia of lying and calling her jealous. But the damage was done. That small detail cracked everything wide open. Within minutes, the entire group chat erupted. Some family members defended Melissa, saying pregnancy made women emotional and she deserved compassion. Others said it was obvious someone was hiding something and the truth needed to come out now. The argument grew so chaotic that Mark could barely keep track of who was yelling at who. But then came the moment no one saw coming. Amber and Chris abruptly left the group chat. No explanation. No goodbye. Just silence. Everyone noticed. Everyone felt the shift. And everyone understood exactly what that meant. If they were innocent, they would have stayed. They would have defended themselves. But disappearing like that was as good as pointing a giant arrow directly at them. Melissa spiraled instantly, calling both of them cowards and claiming they were abandoning her in her darkest moment. But Mark could see it clearly now. She wasn't afraid of being abandoned. She was afraid the truth she had buried, the real truth, was about to resurface. It was no longer a question of if Melissa had lied. It was now a matter of how deep the lie went. And with each passing second, Mark felt the walls closing in around the secret she had tried so desperately to bury. Chris asked to meet Mark in person, and the look on his face already told Mark that whatever he was about to hear wouldn't be simple. They sat on a quiet stretch of sand near the beach house, the wind cutting through the heavy silence between them. Chris kept rubbing his palms together, staring at the ground as if he couldn't bear to face Mark directly. When he finally spoke, his voice was thin and unsteady. He said that on Labor Day weekend, during the family gathering at the beach house, he had been drinking heavily. He remembered almost nothing after midnight. He had passed out in the guest room after a full night of drinking games, shots, and loud music. Amber had gone to bed earlier, complaining she felt dizzy after only one drink, something she later said was strange, because she knew her limits well. At the time, Chris didn't think much of it. Now he knew he should have. Chris told Mark that he had only recently checked the security footage from that night. He had avoided looking at it before because he assumed nothing significant happened. But everything changed once the pregnancy accusations started, and Melissa began dragging his name into the conversations indirectly. So he checked, and what he saw made his stomach turn. At 3:04 a.m., the camera showed Melissa quietly stepping out of the guest room where Chris had passed out. Her hair was messy. Her clothes were crooked. And she kept glancing over her shoulder, as if making sure no one else was awake. She moved quickly down the hallway, smoothing her shirt, then walked straight into the bathroom. A few minutes later, she left again and went back to the guest room she had been assigned for the weekend. Chris said he watched that clip over and over again, hoping desperately that somehow he was misinterpreting it. But there was no way to twist what he saw. Then came the part that broke him. Amber had been asleep in their master bedroom the entire night, so heavily sedated she didn't wake up even once. When she later learned what might have happened, she admitted she had felt unusually sluggish, almost drugged, after that single drink before bed. She had joked the next morning that she slept like a rock. Now, it no longer felt like a joke. Chris's voice cracked when he told Mark he never consented to anything. He wasn't conscious, wasn't coherent, and had no memory of Melissa ever being in his room. He said he felt sick knowing Melissa had taken advantage of him while he was completely incapacitated. And with Amber being drugged into a near coma, the entire situation became even darker. He also admitted he suspected this wasn't some spontaneous mistake. Melissa had been oddly flirtatious that weekend, brushing past him in the kitchen, making long eye contact, asking him questions that felt too personal. He brushed it off at the time, thinking she was just being overly friendly or tipsy. Now he saw everything differently. Chris finally lifted his eyes to Mark, guilt and shame twisting every word he said next. He told Mark that based on the timeline, the footage, and what the doctors estimated, the chances were extremely high that he, not Ethan, not Mark, was the biological father of Melissa's baby. Mark felt the world tilt beneath him. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was something far darker, something twisted and deliberate. And this truth was only the beginning of the collapse that was still yet to come. Thanksgiving was supposed to be peaceful, but the moment Melissa walked into Amber's house, everyone felt the tension hanging thick in the air. She arrived with an oddly confident smile, placing her hand on her stomach like she was presenting a trophy. She moved from person to person, greeting them warmly, pretending nothing in her life was collapsing behind the scenes. Mark watched her closely, trying to understand how she could maintain that facade while the truth was circling her like vultures. Dinner hadn't even started when Melissa announced that she and Amber had come to a beautiful understanding. She said the baby would be raised in a loving, blended home, and that she planned to stay with Amber for support. Amber's expression tightened instantly. She glanced at Chris, who looked like he was about to choke. Mark felt every pair of eyes at the table shift in confusion. Melissa continued talking as if nothing was wrong, describing her vision of a joint family where everyone co-parented peacefully. She even joked that biology didn't matter as long as love was involved. No one laughed. Her voice echoed through the silent dining room like a warning siren. Mark could tell she thought she had regained control of the narrative. But she had no idea what was about to hit her. Chris couldn't take it anymore. He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady when he said he had something everyone needed to hear. Melissa's smile faltered for the first time that night. Amber froze, already guessing what was coming. Chris pulled his phone from his pocket and tapped the screen. A recording filled the dining room, Melissa's voice, unmistakably hers, admitting she had slipped Xanax into Amber's drink that night. Her tone in the recording was casual, almost bragging, as she described how easy it had been. Then came the part that made everyone stiffen in shock. She admitted to going into Chris's room, saying he was too out of it to resist, followed by a laugh that felt chilling in the quiet room. Some people gasped. Others looked away. Amber covered her mouth with both hands as tears spilled down her cheeks. Mark felt his chest tighten as he watched Melissa crumble. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to defend her. There was no one. Amber was sobbing. Chris looked hollowed out. Ethan had his phone raised, recording the moment with a grim sense of necessity. Melissa suddenly pointed at Mark, yelling that he had set her up, that everyone was turning against her because he manipulated them. But the words fell flat. The evidence was too solid, too undeniable. Arguments erupted around the table, voices colliding in anger and disbelief. Relatives demanded answers. Some shouted at Melissa. Others shouted at each other. The warmth of Thanksgiving had evaporated, replaced by the cold reality of what Melissa had done. By the time people stormed out of the house, the celebration was dead. The family was shattered. And no one who was there that night would ever forget the moment Melissa's lies finally detonated in front of everyone. Chris filed the official police report the very next morning. He didn't hesitate, didn't waver, and didn't try to protect Melissa anymore. The recording, the footage, the timeline, everything was stacked against her, and he knew keeping silent would only make him complicit. Once the investigation began, Melissa found herself completely isolated. Family members who once defended her now refused to answer her calls. Friends blocked her. She went from being surrounded by people to being utterly alone in less than a week. Mark was at home when she showed up at his doorstep. She banged on the door, screaming his name, crying so loudly the neighbors came outside to look. She begged him to let her in, swearing that the recording had been edited, that Chris was framing her, that Amber was jealous, that everyone was turning against her because they were threatened by her pregnancy. Mark didn't open the door. He listened silently, feeling more like a stranger to her than ever before. Eventually, she sank to her knees, sobbing incoherently, but he still didn't respond. The woman he had loved was long gone, replaced by someone capable of the darkest choices imaginable. Meanwhile, both families split into two angry factions. One side, the much smaller side, insisted Melissa needed compassion, that people did desperate things under emotional distress. They argued she was overwhelmed, hormonal, misunderstood. But the majority believed she needed to face the consequences of everything she had done. They said she had manipulated too many people, lied too many times, and hurt too many lives to deserve sympathy anymore. Holiday gatherings were canceled because no one could stand being in the same room. Group chats were abandoned. Everyone was exhausted by the never-ending chaos Melissa created wherever she went. And she didn't stop. Even as the investigation tightened around her, she spiraled deeper. She created fake text messages where she pretended Chris had pursued her first. She tried sneaking into Amber's house in the middle of the night, claiming she needed her personal belongings, though she had already collected them weeks before. Amber had to call the police to get her removed from the property. Then Melissa created a public blog titled My Truth, portraying herself as a victim of a massive family conspiracy. She wrote paragraphs about being betrayed by the people she loved, accusing Mark, Amber, and Chris of orchestrating her downfall. She even claimed Ethan manipulated the vasectomy paperwork to ruin her motherhood. Her lies became more elaborate, more desperate, more detached from reality. When she realized public sympathy wasn't coming, she turned to the legal system. She tried to file a claim demanding financial support from Mark, insisting he still had a moral duty to care for her during pregnancy. Her request was denied instantly. Shortly after that, Mark filed for divorce, and the process moved quickly, almost too quickly for her to comprehend. The court ordered her to vacate their home, leaving her with nowhere stable to stay. She bounced between cheap motels and distant acquaintances, who soon kicked her out once they realized she brought chaos everywhere she went. Mark watched the fallout from a distance, feeling numb more than anything. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't shocked. He was simply exhausted. He had given everything he could to the marriage, and now all he wanted was peace. But peace wouldn't come until the final reckoning, the day Melissa would stand in front of a judge and face the full weight of her actions. The sixth section unfolds with a sharper tension, as each character begins to confront not only the consequences of their actions, but the emotional weight they have carried in silence for far too long. The atmosphere grows heavier, yet every moment feels more revealing, more unfiltered, as the truths that were once buried finally rise to the surface. No one speaks impulsively anymore. Every word now lands with intention, shaped by regret, confusion, or an aching desire to be understood. The scene opens with a quiet pause that stretches uncomfortably between them. It is the kind of silence that demands honesty, even from those who have avoided it until now. When the first confession breaks through, it comes out in fragments, as if the speaker is unsure whether the truth will heal everyone or shatter what remains. But the words continue anyway, spilling out like something that has been waiting too long to escape. The others listen without interruption. Their expressions shift as the meaning sinks in, revealing shock, hurt, and a reluctant understanding. There is no dramatic outburst, just the slow unraveling of everything they thought they knew. Each revelation becomes a mirror, forcing them to examine their own decisions and how those decisions shape the chaos around them. Gradually, resentment begins to soften into vulnerability. One character admits a mistake they never intended to confess. Another acknowledges a fear that guided their choices more than logic ever did. And beneath it all, there is a quiet question none of them voice directly: whether forgiveness is possible after so much damage has already been done. Despite the emotional strain, the pace of the conversation becomes more stable. What started as trembling admissions grows into an open exchange, raw and unpolished but painfully sincere. They begin to understand the interconnectedness of their mistakes. No decision existed in isolation. Every action fed into the next, creating a chain reaction none of them could fully control. As the discussion deepens, they confront the final truth, the one they have all avoided. This truth is not loud or dramatic, but heavy and undeniable. Accepting it feels like stepping into cold water, shocking at first, but grounding once the body adjusts. For the first time, they see the full picture instead of the fragments each carried alone. The emotional tone shifts once more, moving from sorrow to acceptance. Their voices grow steadier, no longer trembling with guilt or fear. It becomes clear that understanding has finally begun to replace accusation. And though forgiveness is not yet spoken aloud, something in the atmosphere suggests that it might be within reach. By the end of the exchange, the characters do not feel lighter, but they do feel clearer. Each of them recognizes that the path forward will not be simple, yet it is no longer clouded by unanswered questions or hidden truths. The tension remains, but it has transformed into something more constructive, a fragile but real possibility of reconciliation, built not on illusions, but on the truths they finally dared to face. The ending settles into a calm that feels earned after everything they have endured. The emotional storms have quieted, leaving behind a space where reflection finally becomes possible. Each character stands at a turning point, aware that the choices they make now will define what comes next. There is no dramatic farewell, only a quiet acknowledgement that the truth has reshaped them. They understand each other more clearly, even if the wounds are still tender. The lingering tension softens into something more human, something that hints at the possibility of healing rather than further conflict. As they part ways, their steps feel heavier but more certain. They no longer carry the weight of unspoken words or hidden resentments. The future remains uncertain, yet it no longer feels like a threat. Instead, it feels like a blank page waiting to be written with intention rather than fear. In the final moments, a gentle silence settles, one that reflects acceptance, not avoidance. It marks the end of the turmoil and the beginning of whatever they choose to build next. And though nothing is fully resolved, there is a quiet hope that growth will come from the truth they finally faced.